Over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the story of God and how God's original intent was for the people of God to thrive in the place of God and dwell in the presence of God. But then human sin came into play and messed all of that up. And the rest of the story is about God's amazing rescue plan to bring us back. His desire to bring us back to His original intent. Well, I'd like to talk to you today about how the church really fits into that rescue plan. It plays a vital role into God's rescue plan. We're going to be looking at the book of Ephesians. We'll start in chapter 1 and what Paul has to say about this in the book of Ephesians. First off, let's look at Paul's in chapter 1. He begins by telling us this really 30,000 foot view level of the rescue plan. He says, hey, come up and look at it on a very cosmic level of God's intent. I'd like to read verses 9 and 10 with you. In chapter 1 it says, and through the revelation of the Anointed One, He unveiled His secret desires to us, the hidden mystery of His long-term plan, which He delighted to implement from the very beginning of time. And because of God's unfailing purpose, this detailed plan will reign supreme through every period of time until the fulfillment of all the ages finally reaches its climax, when God makes all things new in all of heaven and earth through Jesus Christ. God's massive cosmic level rescue plan is to make all things new. I mean, we're talking about His desire is for people to be reconciled with God. His desire is for people to be reconciled with people. That you're reconciled with those who have harmed you, with those you have done wrong, with your family. You are reconciled. Well, where people are reconciled with themselves, meaning the fears and the bondages and the things that hold us down, that we find freedom in those. And where people are ultimately reconciled with the physical environment. All things are made new. I mean, anything that has been alienated because of human sin, God says, my plan is to bring all things new through Jesus Christ. And the church, He tells us in chapter 1, the church is the earthly agent to implement that rescue plan. In verses 22 and 23, He says, listen, God has given all authority to Jesus, and Jesus is the head of the church, and we are the body of the church. You see, the church doesn't need a mission. The mission has a church. We don't have to come up with a mission. God's already done that. Jesus is the head. We are the body. Our job is to implement this massive rescue plan. Now, second to this, I want to discuss with you what is the church. Because you see, a lot of us could agree we like the idea of reconciliation. With all the divisions in the world today, that sounds refreshing, doesn't it? That is God's massive plan, is to reconcile all things new. But where we get tripped up is, what is the church? You see, the church is not an institution. It's not a particular denomination. It's not a structure. It's not a movement. The church is actually not any kind of centralized organization that's done by man. That's not the church. I love N.T. Wright's definition of the church. He says the church is the community in which men, women, and children of every race, color, social, and cultural background come together in glad worship of the one true God. When we talk about the church, we're not talking about individually like, this is my religion and I keep it kind of private, and that's your religion and you keep yours. He is talking about a community of people here as we come together of the church. You see, when we read on down in chapter 2, he begins to give us another visual picture. He gave us the body picture in chapter 1. And in chapter 2, he gives us the picture of the temple. And he says, hey, listen, we're all the church and we're building blocks of the church. Just like a temple, we're the building blocks of the church. I'm a block. You're a block. Stephen's a block. Zeke's a block. The church in Brazil has blocks. The church in Afghanistan has blocks. The church in China has blocks. We're all blocks connected to the one cornerstone block, which is Jesus. And we're building the dwelling place of God because the temple is the dwelling place of God. We're building the community as we come together to worship the one true God. That's the church. He goes on to say in verses 21 and 22, he says, this entire building is under construction and is continually growing under his supervision until it rises up completed as the holy temple of the Lord himself. This means that God is transforming every one of you into the Holy of Holies, his dwelling place, through the power of the Holy Spirit living in you. Do you hear? He's modeling with the body illustration in chapter 1. He's saying that the church is under a supervision because it's under the supervision of Jesus. He's the head of the church. And then as he moves on down, he's saying that the church doesn't do it on its own. There's a lot of meat in these two passages. He's saying it's not in our own power. Yes, we're the body and we're the agents, we're the blocks, but he's saying, no, listen, you can't do it on your own. That there is no grand plan of evangelism or discipleship or a great welcoming team that grows the church. None of those things are bad, but they don't grow the church. The way the church grows is when the agents, the earthly agents to live out the rescue plan, become surrendered to the Holy Spirit. You see, you know how the head directs the body? Through the Holy Spirit. He says in verse 22, through the power of the Spirit living in you. The Spirit living in us. Do you remember back at Pentecost, and we read about in Acts, all of the sudden the disciples came together and they were able to speak in languages they didn't know. They were able to communicate to unbelievers, to people of different races, of different generations, of different places. They were able to communicate in ways they had never been able to before. Why? Because the Holy Spirit breathed on them. The Spirit of God. Listen the way Joshua McNall says about this. He says, God exhaled his Spirit from the resurrected body of Jesus into the sin-scarred bodies of his people on that day. Folks like you and me. It was kind of like divine CPR, and the effects were tangible. People were changed. They said it was this breath or spirit that enabled broken individuals, racists, cowards, and thieves to begin to speak and live in ways that actually made the world a more beautiful place. It's the Spirit of God. The breath of God breathing in us and living in and through us that really allows us to become this community, this agent for the rescue plan. Can you imagine for a moment with me? What if men and women, children, all different races, social backgrounds, all different color, what if we lived this way? What if we lived surrendered to the Holy Spirit, allowing him to move through us in such a way? What would it look like? You see, that's the church. I remember years back when Levi was born. I had always loved to work out and things like that, but then I had kids, of course, and I gained 50 pounds with my second son, Levi. And I remember I realized how out of shape I was, so I decided one day, hey, I'm just gonna look up a class and start working out again. I mean, what's the big deal? You got to start somewhere, right? And so I looked up and found a bar class one morning. And now I had never done a bar class before, but I thought, how hard could it be? I mean, if I get really tired, I'll just grab the bar. And so I borrowed one of my husband's shorts because, remember, I gained 50 pounds, and one of my husband's big t-shirts. I threw my hair up in a ponytail because I'll just get ready right after I take a shower after working out. And I went to the class. Well, to my surprise, I walked in and everybody else had their hair in a ponytail too. But they all looked beautiful. I mean, the way they did their ponytails, I could have gone out on a date night with my husband that way. They looked great. Their faces were beautiful. They had makeup on. It looked great. Their outfits all matched. I mean, I thought they had stepped out of like the Nike store as they were modeling, workout clothes. I did not look like they looked. And so I decided, no big deal. Everybody was kind to me. I'll just stand in the back right corner, right near the door, so that I can escape if I have to. Well, the workout started, and if you've ever done a bar class, they're not easy, even though this one was supposed to be introductory. So it became pretty difficult. At the very kind of close of the class, they passed out these rubber bands, and I was supposed to hold one rubber band with my hand and then put one rubber band on my foot, and then I would push my foot back, and the stretching of the rubber band would then help grow my muscles. Well, I must have gotten the wrong rubber band because you see, mine didn't stretch that far, and I couldn't do it. I mean, I was about to collapse. I could not do this. So I decided, no big deal. I'll just lay the rubber band right beside me and no one will notice, and I'll keep doing the motions. Well, the instructor saw me and decided to use me as an illustration. And she just let the whole class know, hey, listen, no big deal if you can't do this. It hurts. You can just lay the rubber band down and keep doing the motions just like the lady in the back. Well, in that very moment, every female in this class, now, maybe not literally, but it's the way I felt, turned around and looked at me. I never returned to that class. Now, I'm not going to say they were mean because they weren't. I wouldn't just say they were overly encouraging, right? So I decided that this might not be the place for me. And actually, I kind of, for the next couple of years, just kind of refused to visit any other places. Well, then a friend of mine had a workout place a gym that she went to, and she encouraged me to come with her. Well, I did all in my power to avoid it. I came up with every excuse, but she didn't give up. And so I finally agreed the only way to get her to be quiet is to go one time. So I went, but I was pleasantly surprised. You see, I walked into this place and everybody was so friendly. It wasn't just a little bit friendly, but they were happy that I was there. Not only that, they were okay at where I was in my stage of life as far as my physical ability. They were okay with that. And so they gave me the appropriate tools that I needed at my stage and where I was so that I could succeed through that class. But they didn't leave me there. You see, there was something where also they believed in where I could be, because they encouraged me beyond where I was, but they encouraged me to keep taking the next step and that I could believe I could be somewhere different. Well, I continued going to this gym after that one visit for the next 3 years, 3 to 4 days a week. Now, why didn't I just wake up on most of those days and say, I'm tired, I'm sore, the kids woke up in the middle of the night, I needed extra 30 minutes of sleep? What kept me going? It kept me going because people were friendly. I knew that they were for me, not against me. I knew that they were okay with where I was in my physical ability, but they believed and could push me because they could see that there was a new place that I could be. What if every person's experience with the church, and the church being those earthly agents, the community of God, what if everyone's experience with the church was like that? What if? What would it look like? Would you have friends that you know might go? And maybe you're watching this, but maybe you'd be like, I don't go to church, but I'd go to a church like that. I mean, what if? You see, there's something that the church has, an advantage that God's given it, and it's the Holy Spirit. You know, a lot of places can be friendly. A lot of places can be encouraging. They can be all those things. But it's very particular what Paul says here. He says, listen, Christ is the head. And he's asked us to be the agents, but he's not told us to do it on our own. He says through the power of the Holy Spirit. It looks like a people that come together with a willingness to yield themselves to the Holy Spirit, allowing Him to transform them from the inside out in a way that we can't help but share it. You see, the New Testament church did not have members. They had people that were brought into the community. They lived a life together where they worshiped together, where they prayed together, where they ate meals together, where they taught and they were teaching together. And that life, then they went and lived that out into their neighborhoods and into their communities. Because you see, the hope that they had, that what God was doing in them, was the hope that they now saw in everyone else. Hear me, Christ is passionate about His church. He's passionate about it. He's passionate about you, and He's passionate about me. And there is nothing that you have done in your past, or your neighbor has done in their past, or your coworker, that keeps Christ from that. There is nothing that is currently you are struggling with, or someone that you know, that Christ is scared of. He is right there, and He believes and has hope in a way. And through His Spirit, He can give it to us for others. This is the church. And Christ is passionate about His church. Josh McNall says, we have reason to have hope, because if God declared us right with Him by grace and faith alone, then no person is ever beyond hope. We live now with this conviction, and it drives us to do exactly what the tent maker did after the encounter with the risen Jesus, to bring the good news to the world. My friends, the church is the community of believers that is willing to be yielded to the Holy Spirit. Everything else is just icing on the cake. Because when we begin to be yielded, He does something miraculous in us and through us. And all of a sudden, this is how communities, neighborhoods, schools are transformed. It's the church. Now at Embrace, we are going to start in 2 weeks a series on Acts. I'd love for you to continue to join us through this. You see, we're going to be looking at the New Testament church. Maybe you've never read the book of Acts before. Come and join us as we go through and preach through the entire book of Acts, as we learn what the New Testament church looks like, as we come every time yielded to the Holy Spirit to say, teach us, transform us, live in us, but we do it together. I'd like to encourage you, if you live in the Canton area, we would love for you to attend on a Sunday morning at 10:30 as we come together to learn. Or if you would like to start a home church where you are, let us know. Send us an email. We'd love to help you come and join with other people and community as you grow together. As you grow together to become the dwelling place of God. Or maybe you already live and you know of a local church that you really enjoy. I encourage you to get involved in the community. Give them a chance to be the community of God. Maybe they actually need you to go to model what the community of God looks like. Well, I hope to see you, or for you to come and watch online with us in the next 2 weeks as we look at Acts. And then next week, Stephen will close up this sermon series. Thanks for joining. God bless.